Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending and participating in our second segment of the Day 1 Sustainable and Inclusive Finance Forum. A few housekeeping before we start. Just to let you know that all attendees will be muted throughout the session. If you have a question at any time that you'd like to ask, please post it on the Q&A function that you have there to our hosts and panelists. There's also for general communications, please post it to the chat function group. We will have our moderator on chat to monitor all questions and comments coming in. Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for attending the second segment of the Sustainable Inclusive Finance Forum. This is the Green Sukuk 3 years on. I'm very pleased to say that we have nearly 400 people registered today, and it's from all over the country and around the region. And we have an interesting lineup of content for you today with great speakers and presenters and panel discussions. So without further ado, I am pleased to welcome Dr. Firas Rad, the Country Manager for World Bank Malaysia Inclusive Growth and Sustainable Finance Hub, for his opening remarks.
Okay, thank you very much, Mei Ling. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues. 3 years ago, on July 27th, 2017, the world's first ever green sukuk was issued. At 250 million Malaysian ringgits, it was not a big issuance by the norms of the Malaysian capital market, yet its impact was felt around the world as it signaled a convergence between the instruments of green finance and Islamic finance. A joint working team from Bank Negara Malaysia, the Securities Commission Malaysia, and the World Bank had led a multi-year effort to introduce this new and innovative financial instrument, thus providing a new mechanism for channeling investments towards green-related projects, sectors, and infrastructure. Today, as the world continues to navigate the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, much has been said about seizing the opportunity to build back better. A post-pandemic recovery, in our view, should seek to also be a green recovery, and one in which our financial systems and economies are made more resilient to future climate-related shocks. As we contend with these overlapping crises, we will need to transition to carbon-neutral and resource-efficient economies as nations continue to aspire to fulfill their 2030 SDG commitments. Within this context, it is worth noting that the collective assets under management of the 3,000 plus financial institutions that have signed on to the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment have risen to $103.4 trillion as of March 31st, 2020. This development reveals that global investors are continuing to shift their focus towards investing in environmental sustainability. It is equally important that Sharia-compliant investors have the same ability to make sustainable investments, which is why the Green Sukuk instrument and other variants of Sharia-compliant sustainable securities are valuable tools in the global effort to move towards a more resilient and sustainable financial system. The world will need private capital to fund sustainable investments to the tune of $2.5 trillion per year to close the projected financing gaps. Countries will need to scale up investments in green technology and innovate financially to meet investor demand for sustainable investment products. The developed markets remain the largest source of private capital, yet the level of private capital in emerging markets is also rising. For emerging markets to be attractive for sustainable investors, financial products such as Green Sukuk, Sustainability Sukuk, SDG Sukuk, and others would be needed to provide a range of options for the discerning investor. Malaysia's efforts in this space continue to show effective leadership and innovation. The efforts of Bank Negara Malaysia and the Securities Commission Malaysia, including through the work of the Joint Committee for Climate Change, JC3, are key steps towards the gradual adoption of sustainable financing practices in the Malaysian financial markets. Today's discussions on the issuance of the first ever green Sukuk is an important milestone as we take stock of the past 3 years and reflect on our shared experience in developing and promoting this new instrument. The tagline on our Green Sukuk video is Financing the Future. We should all remember that it is our planetary future that we are financing. Thank you, and on behalf of the World Bank Inclusive Growth and Sustainable Finance Hub in Kuala Lumpur, I wish you all a fruitful discussion in this upcoming session. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Mei Ling.
Thank you very much, Shiraz, for your opening remarks. For the next segment, I am pleased to introduce Marina Mahdi, our speaker and presenter. Marina is an independent financial consultant with more than 8 years' experience in Islamic debt capital markets, fundraising, structuring, and origination. In 2017, she received the Cambridge Islamic Finance Leadership Award, followed by recognition as one of the top 50 most influential women in Islamic finance in 2018 and 2019 from Cambridge IFA. She was previously with Khazanah Nasional and was instrumental in the setting up of Malaysia's first sustainable and responsible investment, SRI Sukuk in 2015, and the retail SRI Sukuk in 2017. I'm pleased to present Marina.
Thank you, Mei, for the introduction. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marina. I collaborate with World Bank as an independent consultant for the Green Sukuk study, and today I'm going to show you the journey of Green Sukuk from 2017 and 3 years after, and what it is today. So I will briefly take you through some background of Green Sukuk and its performance, as well as challenges and opportunities for this high potential financial instrument. You can see how the Green Sukuk evolved from bond to green bond to Sukuk and eventually Green Sukuk. As Sukuk act as a method to raise funds from Islamic capital market, Green Sukuk means raising funds from Islamic capital market to be used for environmental projects. So let's move on how to issue a Green Sukuk. Although people say that issuance process is tedious and complicated, we've summarized it into 9 simple steps. The initiation will come from the need of funds that translate into decision to do a Green Sukuk. The project then evolves to appointment of relevant working team, and since this is a green issuance, working team will need to evaluate and select the suitable green project. Concurrently, rating analysis needs to be done together with the necessary Sukuk documentation. Once the document and rating are ready, the Green Sukuk is ready for a roadshow to market the Sukuk to the investors. The Green Sukuk is then ready to launch to the market. 7 steps is when the Green Sukuk is finalized with the confirmed pricing and final allocation. Steps 8 and 9 are merely post-issuance, which is management of proceeds to ensure that it is channeling to the right green project, and the issuer are supposed to maintain relevant information on the progress of green project. These are all going to be documented via impact reporting. The next slide is focusing on frameworks or standards that support Green Sukuk. We've differentiated to 3 levels: global, regional, and national. International Capital Market Association, ICMA, Climate Bond Initiative, CBI, ASEAN Capital Market Forum, ACMF, and at national level, Securities Commission Malaysia. The key elements are more or less the same except for CBI, which emphasizing on external review. And the variation between standards are merely to cater for the users, as global standards may have a broader view compared to ASEAN region, and national level that mainly focus on ASEAN and country level. We've also identified different enforcement between standards on post-issuance reporting and external reporting, whether it's mandatory or encouraged by its standards. When we talk about external reviewers for Green Sukuk, it's often called second opinion review, and based on the green project, an external reviewer will allocate different shades of green based on the impact of identified green project. We have CSERO, we have RAM Sustainability, we have Sustainalytics, and the Climate Bond Initiative to lead on second opinion review. In some markets, government and regulatory authorities are stepping in to offer subsidies and incentives to reduce the initial cost impact and encourage the growth of the market. In Asia region, we saw tax incentives and grants from Malaysia. Singapore launched Green Bond Grant Scheme. China with interest subsidies. Hong Kong also have their Green Bond Grant Scheme. Impact reports are post-issuance reports issued every year by issuers on the utilization of proceeds and updates on the environmental effects post-issuance. So this slide is actually showing the journey of developing the first Green Sukuk in 2017. We put it in 7 stages of development. Started with initial discussion between World Bank, Bank Negara Malaysia and Securities Commission Malaysia for a new asset class in Islamic finance atmosphere. It then evolves to further discussion of the ideas between technical working group and other bodies to promote the idea. In July 2017, Tadao Energy issued the world's first Green Sukuk. This only took 1 year from the initial discussion. So where is Green Sukuk or Green Bond today? There are a total of 496 issuers of Green Bond and Sukuk, while there are 1,788 total of Green Bond and Sukuk issued in the market to date. 271 billion USD is the total of green issuance today. Out of that, 3.5 billion is Green Sukuk. That is 1.3% Sukuk out of total green issuances, and the balance 98 are green bonds. Green Sukuk issuances shows the highest in 2019, with approximately 3.5 billion USD was issued, more than double than 2018 numbers. In terms of number of issuance, both 2017 and 18 has 3 issuances, while 2019 has recorded 9 Green Sukuk that was issued during the year. And up to date, we have 2 issuances that was issued in 2020. Moving on to the next slide, 65% of total Green Sukuk issued is in USD, while the rest was issued in Euro, Indonesian Rupiah, and Ringgit Malaysia. Even though the number of issuers of Green Sukuk mainly comes from Malaysia, in terms of size, Republic of Indonesia and MAF Sukuk from UAE issued large size issuances in USD. That translates to the result that you can see from the slides. The next 4 slides, I'm going to show you the performance of Green Sukuk in Malaysia. Having said that, note that the available universe of Green Sukuk is still very small, and the limited amount of available data makes it challenging to make a definitive conclusion. We've selected solar green Sukuk issuances with same credit rating and comparable issuance sizes. From research done, we found out that trading volumes for the Green Sukuk are generally low. Graph shows yield curve for the 3 issuers benchmarked against a generic AA3 corporate Sukuk yield curve in June 2020. The AA3 solar green Sukuk in Malaysia prices between 7 to 70 bips above generic AA3 corporate Sukuk. This could mean that investors see the difference in spread, reflecting new and unfamiliar solar power generation concept in the country, and have thus priced in a higher risk premium. The third graph shows the movement of AA3 solar green Sukuk yield for the 5-year tenure over time from issuance date to April 2020, benchmark against generic sovereign Sukuk. While yield of the green Sukuk are declining over time as sovereign yield fall, the spread for issuances are widening from 120 to 140 bips at issuance to 170 to 280 bips above 5-year sovereign Sukuk. The fourth graph shows relationship between hydro and solar issuance yield over tenure, which translate into a parallel movement between both issuances. Having said that, Telekosang issuance have a slightly higher yield compared to solar issuance. But as mentioned earlier, data is based on limited number of issuances, whereby for hydro sector, Telekosang Sukuk is the only green Sukuk to date. For hydro, the trading volume of Malaysian corporate green Sukuk in the secondary market is rather low. There may be various reasons to contribute to this. Limited supply of green Sukuk and the relatively higher yield could also be a contributing factor. So what is beyond green Sukuk? The Malaysian capital market has seen various types of Sukuk that could be grouped under sustainable umbrella since 2015. In 2015, Malaysia kicked off SRS Sukuk that would now be considered as social Sukuk. The graph shows Malaysian Sukuk issuances segregated based on their green, social, SDG or sustainability features. The change of government in Malaysia in 2018 temporarily disrupted the pace of overall bond market issuance activity due to business environment uncertainty, while COVID-19 pandemic undoubtedly affected the pace of issuance in the first half of 2020. On the next slide, we'll put out an interesting explanation by Sustainalytics to differentiate between green, social, and sustainability bonds. While green bond focus on utilizing proceeds on environmental projects, social bond focus on utilizing the proceeds from the bond for social impact projects, while sustainability is actually a combination of both green and social bond. Further beyond green Sukuk will be SDG Sukuk, which utilization of proceeds focus on specific United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. HSBC Amanah Malaysia Berhad issued the first SDG Sukuk on September 20th, 2018. This Sukuk was targeted for 7 related SDG: good health and well-being, quality of education, clean water sanitation, and many others. While no blue Sukuk has been issued at the time of publication, blue bonds have already appeared in the global stage in 2018. The blue bond is designed to support sustainable marine and fisheries projects. We believe it's likely a matter of time before the first blue Sukuk is launched. So what are the challenges and opportunities for green Sukuk? For an issuer to issue a green Sukuk, a few additional steps that have been outlined earlier are needed. These additional steps are within capability of most issuers. However, not all issuers make the decision to tap into sustainable finance market. We have identified a few issuances in Malaysia recently that has potential to be a green Sukuk, but did not take the additional steps to issue a green Sukuk in the capital market. In 2019, there's a national water asset company issuance to fund new and existing water supply assets. And there's also a Sukuk that was issued by a renewable energy company for solar asset. In 2020, there was a Sukuk issuance by a rail transport company where the utilization of proceeds was for construction of the rail network. These issuances had the potential to be a green Sukuk, but they didn't take the additional steps to issue it as a green Sukuk. What are the challenges behind issuing green sukuk? One of the challenges that we identify is project-based green sukuk issuances. Common in Malaysia so far mainly focus on renewable energy, with some green real estate that runs risk of overly associating green sukuk with renewable energy and green real estate. Green sukuk could be used to finance much wider range of projects beyond renewable energy and green real estate. Another major challenge would be many financial institutions in developing world do not differentiate between green and non-green assets in their portfolio, that are thus unable to identify a pool of green assets for the green sukuk issuance. For the opportunities, potential green sukuk issuers that have existing conventional sukuk issuance facility program should consider using the same facility to issue a green sukuk. This could result in time and cost savings for a green sukuk issuance. Secondly, many potential issuers may not be aware that refinancing of proceeds that has already utilized green project is allowed under the green bond principles. This means that issuer could initiate their green project and issue the green sukuk afterwards. This is an additional option that potential issuer could consider. The financial markets are constantly evolving. The final slides shows other potential environmental projects that may be linked to green sukuk. Over time, repeat issuances will lead to increase in efficiencies for both institutional and market. Then we can subsequently see reduction in costs. Green sukuk investors are those who are willing to shift their investment from normal profit-driven to investment and environmental returns. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marina, for a very interesting presentation. I definitely learned a thing or two about green sukuk and all the opportunities and challenges. Next, we'd like to show you a short video on green sukuk 3 years on.
Climate change poses an unprecedented threat to the world. In the past 2 decades, we've seen the alarming rise of carbon emissions, resulting in rising global temperatures. This is the most urgent issue of our time, and we must make the most of our opportunities to solve it. We need to unlock investments in clean energy and efficient infrastructure in working towards climate-friendly development.
The emergence of green Islamic bonds, or green sukuk, as a new financing instrument allows investors from the Islamic world and non-Islamic investors to contribute to global efforts to ensure sustainability. This innovative move of marrying Islamic finance and green finance opens up new channels of financing as investors around the world become more aware of the threats posed by climate change.
The green sukuk was very exciting for us. Not only is it the first green sukuk in the world, but more importantly, it's actually assisting our client to raise funding of their solar project. Cost-wise, to get the green sukuk, it's a nominal sum that the client's very happy to pay. It's insignificant to the overall cost. I don't think it will be an impediment for anybody to try and get the green certification.
The whole process took us about 3 weeks for us to obtain the highest level of certification, which is dark green. It is cost efficient, which is a very, very nominal cost for green issuance.
But it is the first time we do a project of this scale in the country. So we need to ensure that in structuring funding for a project like this, we mitigate all the risks and we have to ensure certainty. This, coupled with the fact that it is a green project, I think it makes it appealing.
More and more investors have been making their investments green and sustainable. Since 2017, Malaysia has seen 6 green sukuk issuances, and that number is set to rise. Indonesia and the United Arab Emirates have also issued green sukuk. To date, $3.5 billion of green sukuk have been issued.
Since the launch of the Green Sukuk 2 years ago, thanks to the innovative efforts of a technical working group formed by the World Bank, the Central Bank of Malaysia, and the Securities Commission of Malaysia, there's been growing interest by both corporate and sovereign issuers in this new financing tool. Looking ahead, we hope to unlock its full potential to finance a green and sustainable future.
By working together, we can build a safer, more sustainable world for us and for future generations. Green Sukuk, financing the future.
Thank you. So that was the video, and next is our panel discussion. We have a very good lineup of speakers and our moderator, and I would like to introduce to you Zalina Shamsuddin, who is our moderator for this afternoon. She is the General Manager for Capital Markets Malaysia, an affiliate of the Securities Commission of Malaysia. She joined Capital Markets in 2014 as Head of Strategy and Business Development. She has over 20 years of experience, predominantly in corporate advisory, and worked in 5 countries in different regions in Asia, Middle East, and the Indian subcontinent. She holds an MBA in Finance from Cass Business School, UK, and is a Fellow of the Association of Certified Chartered Accountants. Over to you, Zalina.
Hi, thank you very much. Good afternoon and welcome to this panel on Green Sukuk 3 years on. Please allow me to introduce your panelists today. We have from World Bank, Rosani Osman, who is the Senior Financial Sector Specialist, Mr. Yeo Teck Liat, who is the Head of Capital Markets Group M Investment, Tengku Dato' Abdul Aziz, who is the CEO of PNB Merdeka Ventures, and Esther Teo, Head of Fixed Income, Affin Hwang Asset Management. Thank you for joining us, and could I please invite each panelist to sort of share a few words on what your view of the Green Sukuk journey has been before we start going into the questions and answer session, please. Can I start with Tengku Dato' Abdul Aziz, please? Dato', I think you're still on mute, Dato'.
Sorry. Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank World Bank Group for inviting us to participate in this webinar as a panelist. Perhaps for us as a starter to share with you the journey that we have had for over the last 3 years in issuing the first Merdeka ASEAN Green SRI Sukuk program. It's quite a mouthful, but one size is 2 billion. And we have actually applied this Sukuk to a green building. So I think it has been an interesting journey, which I can share in a while. And I think it has been also fruitful for us because it also signifies our commitment to enhance the green features, not just the physical attributes, but also through the financial structure that we have used for financing this construction of this building.
Okay, thank you so much, Dato'. Could I just now invite Teck Lang? Are you there? Okay, I think while we're waiting for Teck to sort of organize his video, Esther. Oh, great, Esther, you're there. Esther, could you give us a few words while we wait for Teck?
Yes, sure. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Esther. I'm from Affin Hwang Asset Management. Thank you to World Bank for inviting me as a panelist for today's session. Just a little bit of introduction. So Affin Hwang Asset Management is the top 3 asset managers in Malaysia. So we have over 65 billion ringgit of assets under management. And within our fixed income portfolio, I would say about 2/3 of our assets are invested into bonds. And in terms of ringgit bond exposure, we are quite a large player in the Sukuk space because about 2/3 of our investment in Malaysia are in Sukuk. Yeah, so we actually participated in numerous issues since the green bond has been issued in Malaysia over the last 3 years, which we can share more later on. But we are excited that we think, we can continue to see growth into this area.
Great. Thank you so much, Esther. Tech, are you with us? I can see the M-Bank logo at the back. Tech, I think you're still on mute. Okay, while I'm waiting for Tech, let's go to Rosani. Rosani, do you want to say a few words?
Hi, thank you, Zalina. I think one of the challenges when we were working on the Green Sukuk... Oh,
yes, Tech, we can hear you now. Cool. Go ahead, Rosani.
Okay, I think one of the challenges that we face when we've been working on the Green Sukuk was the unfamiliarity of the market in terms of what is green and how you can meld it with the Sukuk, Green Sukuk. So I think a lot of the efforts in the early years was on capacity building in terms of knowledge sharing with the financial market. What does it mean to be green? And I think that's something that's an ongoing journey that will need to continue as we move from the institutional towards the retail space.
Okay, thank you, Rosani. Okay, Tech, are you there? We seem to have lost Tech. I think while we're waiting for Tech, I'm going to start the ball rolling. Rosani, based on your comment, I think I've shared that journey with you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Tech, we can hear you, but we can't see you. Okay, so sorry, let me just go back to Rosani. Rosani, you've talked about awareness and stuff like that, right? But it's been 3 years. We've been doing this since 2014 when the SRS Sukuk framework came out. The first issuance came out in 2017. And I think with all due credit to the intermediaries, the institutional investors recognize the importance of sustainable investments, green investments. The intermediaries have been positioning green Sukuk issuance and stuff like that. Why do you think awareness is still an issue?
I think one of the things is that there's a lot of unfamiliarity about what exactly is green, because a lot of people have a general idea that green is environmentally friendly, which is kind of true. But then people think that green is only solar panels and it's only green buildings, and that's about it. Which is why when we look at the issuances of Green Sukuk in Malaysia, we see green buildings, we see solar companies, and we have one hydro company and no one else. We don't see the rail operators involved. We don't see water. We don't see waste management and or biodiversity yet. And yet all those are also green. So I think that's where the development of a taxonomy, green taxonomy for the country, such as the climate change and principles-based taxonomy by Bank Negara, that's one of the things that will help define what constitutes as green, so that when we're moving forward, we can generate assets that are green, which can in turn be securitized and issued as green Sukuk.
Okay, thank you, Rosani. Dato, I'd like to ask you a question, please. I think, like Rosani said, I think the general perception is most solar companies are the ones that are issuing green. Your Merdeka Ventures issuance was a very novel, very new, interesting, because it was the first green building that leveraged on the green Sukuk structure. Could you sort of share with us the thought process and why you decided to choose green financing in addition to your green facility, in addition to sort of ensuring that your building was green?
I think to share with you, Zelina, and the rest, those following this, when we first look at the financing structure, we have decided early on that it has to be Sukuk, which is Islamic financing. And when we know that there is the possibility of having a green Sukuk subscription for our program, we thought, why not do it? Because in the first place, as a background to this Merdeka Ventures project, it is a 118-story building, and it'll be targeting for 3 platinum certifications, green building certifications, which is the GBI, Greenery, and also LEED from US. So having those goals already right from day one, the issuance of the green sukuk kind of ties closely with what we have in mind. And I think perhaps what we learned in the journey was that because within the tower we have a hotel and also the observation deck, which might be a kind of issue, a problem with the having Sharia compliance issues and so on. So we need kind of ring fence the financial structure. So what we did was to only provide, or rather do a $2 billion issuance for the office portion only. So, and this office is definitely will be rated for the 3 platinum green certifications. So I think that's kind of help us to ensure that we can follow the next few steps to get on with the final issuance. And I think that is something that we learn through the process, because before that, we only know that this is only for renewable energy. So I think to us, it is a very pleasant surprise that it can be applied to a building environment. So I think that's when we decided, yes, let's do it.
Great. So, Doctor, can I just ask you a question? You mentioned that you had to do additional certifications and had to look at other factors of the project to ensure that it was green. Was there significant transaction costs involved in making your project more green and to get green sukuk?
Well, to make the green, the building green itself is one of the first decision that we made. And of course, it's slightly higher than the normal building. I would say about 5 to 10% higher. But then because green buildings means you are looking at the life cycle cost. So you might spend a bit more early on, but over the next years, throughout the life of the building, 50 or even 100 years, you can actually save a lot of costs in the maintenance and operations of the building. So I think it is something that we said, let's embark this and go for the long-term financial savings.
Okay, and from issuance of a green sukuk, I understand you needed to get a third-party certification. Was there anything else that you needed to make sure that you qualify for a green sukuk issuance, or the?
Well, I would say there are kind of 5 steps that we have to go through. The second step is to, as been mentioned by Marina earlier, that we have to appoint a second-party reviewer for us to know whether we can really qualify or we don't. So in our case, we have appointed Cicero to be the independent assessor. And I think this is where, because we have got to really start from the beginning. So for us as the issuer, we have got to, as part of the process, we have to develop a framework, a green sukuk framework. I think this is where we need to actually kind of tabulate the intended usage of the proceeds and ultimately all the way to the reporting system. So I think that takes a bit of time, because we have got to really pool the whatever information that we have in building this building green, and take all those factors and be part of the reasons why we want to be kind of make this sukuk green. So I think that process was done properly, and then after having submitted that report, we received what we call a second opinion report. I think this is where we really know whether we can qualify or we just stop there. So in our case, we were given a medium green certification, which means that we can move on to the next step. So I think that's where we really put our team together and start doing the DUD process, eventually the lodgement of the sukuk to SC, and the same time, and after that, the issuance of the green sukuk. So it's quite a good process that we went through.
Thank you so much, Dato. Esther, if I could ask you the next question. So we've heard it from the issuer point of view. I just wanted to ask from an investor point of view, what is your experience? What has your experience been in investing in green sukuk in Malaysia? What are the factors you look for when you are looking at a green investment, be it bond or sukuk?
Yes. Yes. So we were involved in the first sukuk, the first green sukuk, which is Tadao Energy. And we were one of the investors in that particular deal. So I think that was the first time actually we are looking at a solar project as well. So it was something really new for us to look into it. So I would say that it was a learning experience because we need to get our knowledge into solar, how it works, the risk involved, and we look at the other regional and global solar players and the other bonds in the market in the region as well. And also so for us, how we look at a green bond, in a way, is not much different from how we look at the conventional bond, because we still look at the credit fundamental first. Okay, so credit fundamental is our key factors that we look at, whether this particular project is viable financially. And the other additional benefit that being a green bond is that we are assured that the proceeds raised from our bond issues is used for a green purpose. And that is something that, as part of the current ongoing theme of ESG investing, and the growing demand by our clients, which many of them are the major asset owners, right, like pension funds and insurance. Definitely, we have considered green sukuk as one of the key investment strategy going forward. Yeah. So the other thing that we look at, why are we looking at green sukuk in Malaysia and the region, is a way to diversify as well. As you know, solar is a very new sector in Malaysia. So for us, it's about diversification of sector as well as issuers. Yeah. But having said that, it's not been a very smooth journey as well. As you know, within the solar sectors, there has been a few issues with some issuance that have issues, right? So there were another issue that was downgraded, and that caused a little bit of concern among investors community on the solar sector, as well as how certain, because a lot of these projects are issued either on a green field or a brown field part of the financing. Yeah. But I think for us in Affin Hwang, how we look at it is not much difference, because we still need to do our homework to make sure that we do the cash flow analysis, as well as looking at the management and the shareholders behind the project. And that's how we approach it in looking into green sukuk.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Esther. So based on that comment, right, whereby you do look at the credit fundamentals when evaluating, but you also recognize that the ESG filters are relevant and important for long-term returns, right? So can I ask Tech? Tech, are you there, Tech?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I am.
Great. Tech, did you see a difference in pricing in your experience? Did you see that the investors were willing to forego financial returns for ESG returns?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll save the thank yous for World Bank later, but I think straight into it. I think what Esther brought up is a very pertinent point, which is that I think investors look at credit first, and I think that's the key point. That in any project, I think yes, it's good that it's green. Yes, it's good that it ticks the ESG boxes, but I think fundamentally there has to be assessment of whether the credit is something that the investors are comfortable with. And I think we've also got to be a bit careful that while we're obviously jumping into on the green bandwagon, so to speak, we've also got to appreciate that a lot of these green technologies are new. And that's not downplaying them, and we're not saying that that's bad. But I think that because they've yet to be tested, I think there is a premium that the market is applying to these issuances. So that's the first thing, which is credit. I think Marina also in her earlier slides brought up the fact that if you compare, the AA3 curve versus, the solar curve versus the AA3, I would say typical corporate curves, you do see that from a project perspective, they're paying a bit of a premium. And really, that is a function of the project itself. That is to say that it is project specific. Yes, it's AA3, but they have technology that potentially is I would say not yet fully proven. There is also a bit of a liquidity premium given the fact that the issuances are pretty small. I think also Dr. Faris also referred to that. So they're all, less than, for the large part, less than 250 million. So that, yeah, so those are, I think, some of the issues that are there. But to your question, yes, I think, there is going to be a bit of a premium. And, you don't see investors, just jumping into it just because it's green.
Okay, so going back to what Rosani had mentioned, that you need to create greater awareness and understanding of the importance of green or SRI Sukuk issuances. Given that in sectors that are going to qualify for green are new technologies that are coming on board, what can we do as capital market players to give that sense of comfort to institutional investors or even retail that yes, is the right way to go? And how do we help educate them more, in your opinion? Do you think the banks understand the technology, or is it just an investor concern?
I think it's everybody. I think it's a function of the ecosystem. So I think we need to build an ecosystem where the arrangers, the second opinion providers, the regulators, the investors, all of them fully understand and accept the nature of these risks and the nature of these projects. So the reality is, yes, there has to be education in all fronts. We do it obviously for issuers who are going to the market. We have one-on-ones with investors. We walk them through to try to understand the technologies that are involved, the project risks that are involved. But the reality is that it will take time, and we want to build a market and an ecosystem that is resilient. And when we look at that, we need to think about not rushing projects or not trying to push things into the market just because they're green or just because they tick certain boxes. I think we really need to go back to the fundamentals of credit.
Thanks, Tech. So based on something that Tech just mentioned, Rosani, I just want to pass the question back to you. So Tech mentioned that one of the issues is liquidity, that the size of the projects are still averaging about 200 million, and that impacts the investment grade of the projects. And you had mentioned in your earlier statement that everyone tends to assume that green is renewable energy, solar. So they don't seem to recognize that there are other segments of the economy that could leverage on the green financing. But going back to green Sukuk, can I suggest that the reason why the growth in this space is still small is because the size of the projects in the green economy are relatively small for a Sukuk market. What are your views on that?
Thank you, Zelina. I think you have a good point there, where a lot of the new green technologies that are coming out, for example, one of the reasons why the solar companies have been coming out with 250 million ringgit issuances has been the size of the LSS large-scale solar contracts that were issued. There were roughly about 50 megawatts or so. And so at 50 megawatts, you're going to end up with about 250 million ringgit worth of Sukuk issuances. And that's just how it works, because that's roughly how much the project is going to cost. So if those projects are still coming out at those sizes, then by definition, the issuances will be around that size. Now, that's a limitation of the solar industry, not a limitation of the green industry. When we look at other types of green projects, potential green projects, for example, urban transport, in terms of rail transport, when we talk about mass rail transport, where you can move people, large numbers of people in a very energy efficient way using electric trains, for example. Now, those projects tend to be huge, in the billions of ringgit. Now, that is an area where we could potentially see a green sukuk being issued to finance these type of projects, and I think liquidity will be much less of an issue there, because those issuances will be much bigger. I think that's a potential solution to this issue. It's just that because the first few issuances of green sukuk were small, some people may have made the inference that by definition all green sukuk are going to be like that. But actually no, it's just the fact that the first few small green sukuk were all solar green sukuk. So that's why it's like that. So we can actually see something different in the future.
Thanks, Rosani. Dato, I would have the next question is for you. You had mentioned that when you had issued the green sukuk, it was a medium green.
Yes.
Sort of, in your opinion, what level of greenness is required? What is medium green relative to dark green and light green, based on your experience?
I think in our case, Zalina, because we are still on the construction stage, and having a green building situation itself has got to go like a process to make sure that you by the time you get it constructed, you can deliver all those energy data and get it validated. And so I think this is where we need to build the track record. And I think that's why I think we are quite kind of stuck in the middle of it, which is a medium green. As you know, we have 3 levels of certification, which is either you have a light green or medium green or dark green. Yeah, and renewable energy, I understand, is dark green. In our case, we have the medium green. But I think as long as it's rated, it really qualifies you to go for a green sukuk issuance.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dato. Esther, my next question is for you. Assuming that the government comes out with a policy, or the regulators come out with a policy saying that all investors, institutional or corporate investors, have to allocate 15% of your AUM in sustainable or green assets. Do you think that would be too detrimental to the industry?
Thanks for the question, Zalina. I think on this point, it is always dangerous, I think, for regulators or government to impose such investment, requirements on fund managers or even investors in general, because it might do 2 things. I think one would be that it forces all of us. Of course, it will work in the sense that we have to comply with the regulations, but what it also means is that it may result in us investing in projects that are not viable just to meet that requirement, right? So credit evaluation may not be, that effective in a sense. So perhaps projects that may not be so good quality may still find a home. But if it's done on an independent basis, they may not have been issued. So that over long term may not be good for investors, right? Because these projects get the go ahead because of this push from the government. But what I want to say is that we believe, in fact, the demand for green assets is not lacking in Malaysia. From our perspective, what we've been seeing is that, because we are asset managers, we are investing money on behalf of our clients. And many of them are large asset owners, right? Like pension funds and insurance. And they have been embarking on ESG investing, sustainable investing. And I would say that there is not because of a lack of demand for these instruments or securities, but it is more a lack of supply to meet this demand. So I don't think it's necessary at all for the government or regulators to impose such a, minimum investment level for the industry to grow. But what we do need to see is the growth in the whole ecosystem. Like the other speakers has mentioned, awareness about what green is about, not just about renewable energy, but there's so many other factors. I think if you're in Malaysia today, in Klang Valley, you know that we are facing a lot of problem with pollution. We have been having flooding issues. We have had water cuts. So there are a lot of needs that we can address here. And perhaps, one of the things that we could actually see is perhaps the government taking a proactive steps to be a lead in even issuing green bonds or green sukuk to fund some of these infrastructure projects. Just now, Rosani also mentioned about the transportation sector. So we know that we have a very established government guaranteed programs, right, for our infrastructure like MRT and all that. So perhaps a lot of these can also be turned into green sukuk as well, right? So by creating more and more of these securities, I think investors such as ourselves will be able to participate in them, and we are able to do our proper due diligence in terms of credit, and bringing back to what Teck mentioned about pricing. I also want to make a point about the pricing of these bonds. It is not. I think it started off by people not being familiar with solar. Hence, the pricing for solar bonds has been, you have to pay a little bit of premium. But I think since then, we have seen a number of solar plants. And the good thing about solar is that it only takes about 1 year of construction, right? And the plants will be live and they are generating power. And we are able to now assess how these plants are performing after the construction period. So with the track record now that we have, I believe that investors today are a lot more willing to look at solar issuers compared to, let's say, 3 years ago. So it will take some time, for the market to grow. But I believe that with the right steps taken by all of us, right, from investors, from issuers, bankers, as well as the regulators, we are able to see this green sukuk segment flourish.
Thanks, Esther. So, Teck, I think the pressure is on you as you are the only representative of all the IBs in Malaysia that you need to line up the issuers, Teck.
Thanks. Well, it's good to hear that everybody is keen. So after this, I'm going to pick up the phone and start calling everybody. So you've got to do something.
Make sure you have Esther's phone number so you can call as your first investor. So, Teck, one question, right? Based on your experience, when you helped or when you sort of facilitated the issuance of a green sukuk by Segi Astana, did you see a difference in your investor profile, or was it the same old, same old?
I have to say that, when we did Segi Astana, this was in early 2018. So it again was in the nascent stages of sort of the green, I would say the local green revolution, if you may, among the investors. So the reality is that I think the investor pool that we saw was pretty much the same as what we had previously. I have to say that, and that is the reality.
Thanks, Teck. So based on that answer, Rosani, I have a question for you from World Bank's perspective. At the end of the day, we're a global world, a global economy, a global capital market. Does World Bank, based on your analysis, have you seen a shift in or an increase in interest in ESG investments in Asia coming from the developed markets? And how do you think the fact that it's a sukuk issuance, how do you think that will impact demand coming from the developed markets into this region?
Thank you, Zelina. I think when we look at the interest of ESG investors, or ESG team investors, we can, as a proxy in terms of what the global demand might be, we can look at the UN PRI, the PRI being the Principles for Responsible Investment. If you look at the numbers of signatories, of PRI signatories, they've risen quite a lot lately. As of today, based on the UN PRI website, they have 3,038 investors globally with an assets under management of 103 trillion US dollars. That's a very huge amount of money. And these are people who have committed to the principles of responsible investing, which basically means something like an ESG type investment. And just in the last 1 year, the growth rate in terms of assets under management has been 20%. So a 20% jump between 2019 and 2020 in terms of their assets under management. Now, when we look at Asia, in this region particularly, if you look at before 2016, before 2017, and now, you'll see that the number of PRI signatories in Malaysia is quite different. Before, there were very few. There were one or two, like Khazanah. But now you have QAP, you've got EPF, you've got private asset management companies signing on to be a PRI signatory. So there is recognition that ESG investment is the way to go forward. And that's something that everyone needs to focus on, because as more and more demand comes from end investors to move their own assets towards ESG-friendly investments, so people, asset managers will start looking at green assets, at sustainable assets or social assets, for example, to start investing in those kind of securities. So demand for green would only rise over the long term. Now, when we look at what you would call in terms of the growth rate of these in the region, what you would call like Sukuk investments, in this, how it would appeal. Naturally, when it comes to Malaysia, most of our projects are financed by Sukuk. People are very used to it in the domestic market, and there is sufficient demand in the domestic market to meet the supply of green Sukuk domestically. I guess good and bad, it does mean that a lot of times when Malaysian companies go to the market, they are very focused on the domestic market because they know that the domestic market is deep enough to finance their projects. When you look at other countries in the region like Indonesia, Indonesia doesn't have a big and deep domestic capital market like Malaysia has. So that's why when they went to the market, they went to the US dollar market and they did a massive green Sukuk issuance, a sovereign green Sukuk issuance. And they've done so every single year. I think the first year was 1.25 billion US dollars, and I forgot what last year's number was, but this year was also set was 750 million US dollars. So you see, Indonesia is coming to market every year with a green Sukuk, and 750 million US dollars is a lot of money. There's a lot of money that they have raised for green projects domestically. So I would say that there is demand for Sukuk, and there is demand for green Sukuk. It's just a matter of what kind of investors you are looking for. If you are targeting a domestic investor, you would do domestic currency Sukuk. If you're targeting international investors, you will look for a dollar Sukuk.
Thank you, Rosani. Dato, I have a question here for you from the audience. How do you ensure, the question is, how do you ensure that the project remains green throughout its life and not only at the point of raising funds? So yes. I was looking at your Green Sukuk framework and I came across this. You have annual auditors reports. Could you elaborate a little bit on that, please?
Yes, since we issued our Green Sukuk in 2017, I think we have since then issued letters to investors, which outlines what we have been doing annually in terms of the Sukuk financing of the funds that we have received. And I think to that itself is a commitment that we have made in issuing this Green Sukuk. And this has got to be done over the tenure of the Green Sukuk itself. In our case, it's over 15 years. At the same time, because in our case, the building itself is under green building certification, in order for us to maintain that green standards, we have to revalidate every 3 years. So again, there is also that external factor that makes sure that we comply, because it is something that becomes a requirement for the building, and also it's just to show how committed we are to maintain the green standards that we have done since we started the construction phase. Yeah, I think the other aspect is that by having that letter investors as well, it means that we have to be transparent, be able to tell our investors how much have we used the funds, the unutilized portion, and so on. And also in the letter itself, we also specify what are the green aspects that we are monitoring even during the construction phase. So I think the checks and balances are there to ensure that we are able to maintain the green standards. I think we'll be keep on track, and we track for the next 15 years, at least.
Great. Thank you so much, Dato. So my next question is to you, Esther, going back to what Rosani said about that the array of demand in terms of the investors, it's wide now. So the institutional investors seem to be comfortable with the concepts of ESG. They've committed to PRI, and so you will see a natural demand coming from our institutions in Malaysia. But the reality is our institutional investors are pension funds. They hold funds on behalf of the rakyat, you and me. Based on your experience, based on Afin's experience, do you have funds, retail funds that are ESG, that prioritize ESG? Do you see a demand from the retail side that ESG is important and they would like to invest that way?
Okay, thanks for that question. So let me just start by saying this whole ESG theme, right? It is just like what the definition of green is. The definition of ESG investing is also subject to a lot of debates and different interpretation, right? So some investors look at ESG as being that, oh, I will incorporate or integrate ESG factors into my evaluation. Or some investors look at it as impact investing, which both of these are totally different things, right? So impact investing is, for example, if you're into a green bond, it is very clear that it is for an environmental cause. But as a portfolio manager and also asset owners such as EPF, Quap and Khazanah, I think they look at it from a much broader perspective, because even though the theme of ESG is growing, it does not, given the asset size that these companies have, right? Collectively, if you look at EPF, Quap, and Khazanah, I think they are over $1 trillion in AUM. If you limit the investment to just certified green securities, there would not be enough securities to be invested in. So a lot of them, then we talk to our clients, what they expect us to do, as well as even their internal fund managers to do, is to incorporate ESG factors and consideration when we look into investing. Yeah, so that is what the majority of the understanding is. And then when we talk to individual investors, such as retail investors, like you mentioned, what is interesting is that we find that the younger investors, right, the younger investors are a lot more green, and they are a lot more looking for sustainable investing. To them, it's not so much about financial returns, but they want to make a positive impact, whether it's socially or environmentally, right? And they want to make sure that their money is invested in that way. So to answer your question, whether we have funds currently that are, in line with this theme, we are working on it. We have our product team looking at launching, but it's not limited to just Malaysia. It's a regional fund that would be incorporating more ESG theme when we select our securities. So we do recognize that we have demand from the younger investors, from the retail segment, that are interested in this theme as well.
Great, thanks, Esther. So Tek, my next question is for you. You're the one amongst all of us with your ear to the ground. You know the general landscape. You probably are the only one who knows what are the kind of projects that are coming on board from the private sector or even the public sector. What is your outlook for green issuances? Or do you think green is too narrow? Should we be looking at green, or should we be looking at sustainable Sukuk issuances? Should that be the next journey? Or have we exhausted the green Sukuk journey so far?
Wow, many questions. Let's try to unpack that. I think the answer is, just quickly, in terms of the green, I think we're on a sustainable path. I truly believe that. I think the regulators, everybody has come together to really build that. Issuers like Merdeka Ventures. So, we started on this journey in 2017. We're at 2020. I think we shouldn't get too caught up in being an instant generation. I know we have instant noodles, we have instant coffee, but really, the building of the sort of green capital markets is going to be over, I think, a longer period of time. I think we need to give it about at least 5 to 10 years to season a little bit, get the projects out there, build the pipelines. To your question, I think, are we going to see more green projects? I think the answer is absolutely. It all comes down from the top, in the sense that TNB has committed that, they want 20% of their generation capacity to be in renewables, right? So that's going to be 5 gigawatts of power. So that's significant, right, over the next few years. So, you're going to see investments in renewable energy, be they in solar, be they in hydro. And, I'd be very interested to see what's the new generation, or I guess the next technological leap. But again, to your question, does that also mean that we should just stop at green? The answer is no. We should look at sustainability, Sukuk. Esther talked about impact investing. I think we really need to sort of broaden that scope, look into social type bonds. And, obviously, as arrangers, we're obviously very keen to take any issuer to the market that would be looking to do things like that. But, again, it has to be commercially viable. So that's also, the other issue. It can't just be, we want to do something that is, a social or a sustainability bond, but it's not commercially viable. I don't think we can do that. We're not yet, at that point.
Okay, so Tek, I'm going to put you in a corner here again. So you say that, to build the green capital market, we're going to need at least another 5 to 10 years, right? But realistically, if you read all the literature, right, we don't have 5 to 10 years, Tek. If you look at the carbon emissions, you look at all the data and all that stuff, I'm worried what kind of planet we're going to leave for our children. So how do we fast track this? So if I use the story of the carrot and the stick, so the stick is that the regulators or the government insist on more green projects, or the carrot is we get Esther to offer better returns or a lower cost of financing for green sukuk. What do you think would be the lever that you would use as an intermediary?
Thanks, Lee. But I'm going to just go back to say that it's the ecosystem. It's everybody. I'm gonna say it's a collective responsibility. In that, I think it's up to the regulators to help. They create, I think, the parameters or the pool in which we can all succeed, and they've done well. I must say, even you're part of that. And but and then it's about how the players then play in that. And as I said, you already have Tenaga saying that they're going to make 20% of their generation capacity to be renewable. So that in itself tells you what the path that they're going down, right? Esther talked about pollution and the rest of the other issues. I think those are things which we have to address, right? So I think it's 2 points. So long as you can address those issues by the government coming down hard on polluters and then saying, look, if anybody needs to raise funding to try to help that, this is the way, and then you create also the fertile ground for them to issue. I think all of that then leads, or at least we can all move towards a better place.
Okay, very safe answer. Well done, Tek. Okay, you're right. I think everyone has a role to play. And I think essentially you're saying that if everyone plays that role equally, hopefully we will get traction and we will move forward collectively as a country. Yeah?
Yeah. May I add, Zalina, that
Sure, Esther.
when we are speaking to some of the issuers now, issuers who are not in the space of green yet, oil and gas players, for example, in fact, they are looking to diversify their businesses, right, to more green environment, or even improve their business processes trying to reduce, energy or improve the energy efficiency and do other things to help, So I think if you're the asset owner or capital provider, you can influence how the capital markets will want to fund itself, right? For example, if you're in a sector where actually, like if today you're a pure oil and gas player, maybe deemed to be not as green, it is not as easy to raise capital in the market, right? In fact, your investors might demand for a higher yield compared to someone who is in the green sector. So things are changing. I mean, 10 years ago, nobody cares, right? Whether you're in oil and gas or as long as it makes sense. But in today's world, investors are a lot more aware about where we are putting our money, and are we, supporting green initiative, or are we contributing to more pollution or more, climate change and things like that. So definitely that conversation is taking place. I think even between issuers and investors, and I think that is very encouraging. Of course, I think where regulators or government can come in is to provide incentive, like what many other regions have been doing to help to encourage this process. But having a stick, I believe, it's a short-term solution. What we want is that these issuers or private sectors are serious about really making a change, because one of the big debates in this current ESG investing is this term called greenwashing, right? So greenwashing means that companies are just paying a lot of money for their marketing department to come up with nice stories to tell investors that we are doing so much initiative to meet this ESG requirement. But in effect, the money is not being used to actually channel to this initiative. It's more like a marketing, right? So I think that is another thing that as investors, we need to be a bit cautious. And I think, that's why, there are still challenges that we face, right? Challenges in this green investing. And one of it is like greenwashing, lack of data, lack of disclosure. Yeah, so those are the things that perhaps, regulators can come in to help to standardize how companies can disclose, especially for bonds, because a lot of bond issuers are private entity, right? So if it's listed companies, that there's already standard reporting that is required by Bursa on various stock exchange. But for bonds, sometimes it is hard to get information and disclosure from the issuers on a timely basis, or in a very comparable basis, right? Each one might come up with their own format, and for investors, it's very hard for us to compare the data.
Yeah. Okay, great. Esther, that's a great point about greenwashing or even transition, Sukuk. But that's a conversation for another day. So on that note, Dato', based on what Esther has said, in terms of what would be your word of advice to other potential green Sukuk issuances?
I'd just like to perhaps add on as preparation for being able to participate in the green Sukuk, which is to prepare early, start the journey early on when you first started a project, and see what are other financial options that you can do. And I think by having green Sukuk, you also provide an opportunity for investors to diversify their investment portfolio in green instruments. I think this is useful for the financial market. And to illustrate that point, in our case, when we issued the green Sukuk in 2017, is for domestic investors, 100% domestic investors, and we had an oversubscription of about 1.5 times. So I think it goes to show that the pool is very limited. I think there is a strong interest. So what we need to move forward now is to create more awareness, perhaps, and at the same time encourage more the issuers or investors, or rather the project owners, to consider green Sukuk as another financial option.
Okay, thank you so much, Dato'. Really appreciate that. On that note, Rosani, can I pose two questions to you? Everyone has mentioned about we need to work to increase the awareness amongst potential issuers. And Esther just now mentioned that the challenge is the lack of publicly available information. And based on World Bank's experience in other markets, what would be your recommendation on how Malaysia could sort of further enhance this journey?
Thank you, Zelina. Let me try to answer the first question first in terms of to provide more capacity building, more generation of assets. I think one of the issues is not that we don't have green assets in Malaysia, is that we don't know that we have them. So one of these issues is that right now the people who are aware of the green sukuk and how we can generate, how we can, for example, securitize green assets by issuing green sukuk and all that, are sitting in this room, in this panel. You know, Esther is here, she's aware. Dato is here, he is aware. Tek is in here, he's aware. But what about the general population? What about the people who are running small businesses, the people in the bank branches who are giving out loans, and people on the other side of the counter who are taking loans? They may have a green project, but they don't know that their project is green. And when those projects are not recognized as green, the banks will look at their their books, and they'll see their assets and say, okay, I don't have green assets, so I can't securitize these assets and I can't issue more green bonds or green sukuk. So one of the things that we've been doing, we've been working with the Asian Institute of Chartered Bankers and with IPFIM. We've been running a series of sustainable finance webinars to educate the banking executives and the managers and the working level people in all the banks on what is sustainable, what is green, what is social, different aspects of sustainable finance. So the idea is that when more and more people can recognize different assets as green or social or sustainable, they can then tag those assets, or they can bring it up to their management and saying, okay, I've got a green asset here. So at some point, more and more assets will be recognized as green. And when you look at the bank's balance sheet and look at all the books, you realize that, oh, I have a lot of green assets on my books. So maybe I can securitize some of these and issue green bonds out of them or green sukuk out of them, or perhaps even look at creating specialized products in terms of green loans or green car loans, for example. So that would help in terms of increasing the amount of supply of green assets so that we can ultimately see more green sukuk being issued. What was your second question again, Zelina? Sorry.
My second question is, even I've forgotten it. Hang on a second. Oh, yeah. How do we address the issue of the lack of information, publicly available information, so that we can compare one project to another in terms of disclosures, in terms of, like, as I said, there's so many different definitions, right? There's so many different technologies. If you even take solar panels, they're different technologies. So how do you ensure comparability so that you're comparing the right sort of apples with apples? How do you know that?
Okay, I think a good start to that would be a taxonomy. I know this term has come up a lot today, but what a taxonomy does, it helps identify what is green and what is not green. So one of the problems that we have without a taxonomy is that one person's interpretation of green is different from another person. You might think that for example, one person might think that his car that drives, that's a 1.5 liter car, burns petrol, is green because he can run, for like a month without refueling. But another person will look at her car and say that, my car is electric. It doesn't burn any fossil fuel. So your car is dirty. Your car is not green, but my car is green. But, so different people have different interpretations of what is green and what is not green. That was just an example of how different people might look at it. So a taxonomy allows a country to determine for itself what is green for its own purposes and what is not green. So that helps when you are trying to start a business or you're trying to do something, so you can determine which side of the green or non-green that you're going to land on because of the nature of your business. And that also allows people who are looking for these assets to then analyze and say, okay, I got business A and business B over here. Which one meets the taxonomy criteria, and so this one is more green than the other. It really helps. That's where we need to start, because unless we have that definition, it's going to be very difficult for us to compare different projects and different companies in terms of what is green and what's not green.
Great. Thank you so much, Rosani. I'm afraid we've got quite a few more questions, but I'm mindful of the fact that we're running out of time. So what we will do is we will try to answer the questions from the audience, and we'll probably email you the answers. But to close, can I invite each panelist to give your view on the Green Sukuk? What is the journey going forward? And I'd like to start with Tech, please.
Zarina, thanks. You put me on the spot earlier, so I guess I've more or less said it, right? So I think that we've started off well, frankly speaking. We are one of the bigger issuers. You can see in Rosani's analysis, of the region. We are one of the bigger issuers of Green Sukuk. So I think it's a path that I think we will continue to go on, with the, again, appreciation and understanding by the market players and building this ecosystem. I can only see the market actually continuing to grow. So I'm pretty positive about it. I know, Zalina, it's not fast enough to change all of our coal-fired plants into renewable energy, but that will come. Okay, that
great.
will come. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tech. Thank you so much. Esther.
Well, what I hope to see in the Green Sukuk development is, of course, more diversified pool of issuers. And I think we can start by having more benchmark issuance by the government that could help, like what we see in Indonesia, which they have done, like what Rosani said, a few annual issuances, because that will help to create a benchmark and also for index purpose. At the moment, I think if you look at the local ESG index, we have only about 15 names in the index. And I think that we will continue to see that to grow. And I would like to see also other sectors like financial institution, banks, right, who can securitize their green assets. But what Rosani mentioned just now is perhaps they're not even aware that they had these green assets. But I feel that there are definitely potential there. I think HSBC came out with one Sukuk. Is it a Sukuk? I think it is a Sukuk, but
SDG Sukuk. Yeah.
But perhaps we can also get some Sukuk in the green lending space. Besides that, I think I've already mentioned about disclosure data availability. But one last thing to note is that I think this is a marathon, not a sprint. But we hope that in the next 3 years, we will have an even more meaningful and deeper conversation about this topic.
Thanks so much, Esther. Yes, let's make a date and come back to this panel and discuss this 3 years down the road.
Yes.
And Dato, could I just leave you with the last word? What is your vision for the Green Sukuk based on your experience?
I would say that it would be great to see more and more Sukuk issuance in the future, especially the Green Sukuk issuance. I think, for example, within the real estate industry, we have proven that we can do it. So I'm sure as we move forward, greening more buildings, I think there will be more opportunities for project owners to start considering Green Sukuk seriously as another option.
Thank you, Dato. I absolutely agree with you. Considering we're having so many buildings coming on board, it'd be great if all of them decided to go down the green route. Thank you very much to everyone. I have had an interesting 1 hour in the afternoon. You were great panelists, and I really appreciate the opportunity provided to us by World Bank. Thank you, World Bank, for inviting us. And we hope the discussion was fruitful for all the attendees. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Zelina. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zelina.
Thank you very much, Zelina, and thank you very much to all the panelists. It's indeed a very interesting and lively 1.5 hours panel discussions and presentation. We'd like to, as we come to a close, before this, I would like to thank everyone here who has taken the time to do the poll. There's the poll questions. It's only 3 questions, and we really appreciate your feedback to improve our programming further as we move ahead. And there's also the QR code on the new report pioneering the Green Sukuk 3 years on. And please do download the report and share widely to your networks and contacts. And here, pleased to say that thank you very much, Marina, Rosani, Zalina, Tengku, Teck, and Esther for all your contributions and inputs today. Thank you.